Look, thanks everybody, and look, what a great event the Victorian Fisheries Authority put on for us anglers to learn about the science, the management, a few new tips of how to target our snapper. So look, really, this is fantastic. So thanks very much. I do get out to go for a bit of a fish occasionally, so that's one of the ones of the first bit of the season, which is good. So today I want to talk about our snapper survival program, and it flows on really well to some of the comments that Rod Barber conveyed to us just around some improvements that us anglers can be doing to future-proof our fishery, looking after our future fish, and being really responsible stewards of this fantastic fishery that we have. And we heard from Dallas, it's worth $1 billion. We don't want to ever see the days of the early 1990s or seeing what is happening in South Australia. So around that time that we started seeing those floating fish, VRFish swung into action to prepare a snapper survival campaign. So we got some really great amount of collaboration there, particularly with Dr. Paul Hardy-Smith, who's a fish veterinarian, and he was able to really look at all the research that's around and synthesise that into some really practical tips for us anglers. Also got Franz Grasser, who was leading that project around that time, and it's certainly produced some really great results. A lot of people wanted to know what they could do to help their snapper survive, and certainly seeing less of those instances where we're having any sort of floating snapper. So that's really great, and Al McGlashan was very gracious with some of his fantastic photos, really showing how fantastic our snapper look. So we are in the midst of refreshing this campaign. As we can see, there's a stack of these little pinkies right now, and in 4 years' time, we're going to have some fantastic fishing. So we've learnt that Lucky Phil and all his mates come back pretty regularly. So what we do today will influence how great our fishery will be into the future in the long term. So a little bit about VRFish. We're the peak body for recreational fishing, and look, we want to make fishing better for everybody. And what anglers tell us that they want us to work on is to improve our access, improve our water and habitat, promote fishing, and also best practice. So that's the type of stuff that we're talking about here today. How we can fish for the future and be better stewards of our fishery. So we heard very clearly from our Victorian snapper fishers that no way do they ever want to face what is happening in South Australia. So we've heard very clearly that we need to be supporting Paul and his science, supporting our compliance team and making sure everyone's doing the right thing. But there's plenty of stuff that us anglers can be contributing to a great fishery. So I saw Rex Hunt's here today as well. Someone like him, we're at the forefront of conservation and doing the right thing and looking after our fish. It's all about the kids and about this fish for the future philosophy, which is tremendous. Most of the fish that's caught from recreational fishers around Australia is released. So more and more you'll see campaigns around Care for Cod, Tuna Champions, and obviously our Snapper Survival Program, really giving our anglers the tools to be responsible fishers and getting the best out of our fishery, reducing that type of wastage which we don't want to see. And obviously there's been a stack of research in that as well, which is still growing, and that's what we like to be able to provide, is the evidence-based advice that we can be taking on board, not only just as a message, but as a real culture. So over the next 4 years, we're going to be facing lots of little size snapper, and soon we're going to have lots of big snapper. So we really encourage everybody to spread the word and get everybody on board with snapper survival. So this is a bit of an underwater shot around one of the living shellfish reefs in the bay, and you can see all those little dots there. That's the swarms that are already there right now of little pinkies. So this is a great sign, but it will need that we need to sort of have a look at our fishing practices over the next few years, because these fish are obviously going to be our future fish that we want to be catching at a much bigger size. So when we look at survival of snapper, there's a few factors that we need to consider. The first real big one is deep hooking. The science says, and it's been some great science here in Port Phillip Bay, that deep hooking will result in about a 48% survival rate as compared to those fish that are lipped hooks. Okay, so snapper, bream are really susceptible to this. They're very aggressive feeders. They like to absolutely just swallow the bait. So these traditional J hooks are not really great for this. So if you have a look at over the gill cover, you'll see there's lots of places where that hook can get stuck. All right, so we want to try to avoid that where possible. Now, obviously this is snapper fishing, but have a think about how we might need to change our ways when we're trying to catch a whiting and all these little pinkies are coming through as well. So wherever possible, deep hooking is an issue. So what's the solution? Is circle hooks. So using the inline circle hooks, not the ones off to the side, but the actual straight circle hooks, is really, really effective at lip hooking. And if you can get your hook on the jaw or the lip of the fish, you're not going to really lose that fish in a hurry, all right? It's got a really good, hooked up really, really well. You can put on all your Paternoster rigs and running rigs. The best thing is it's easily removed, so you can see where the hook is and release it. But I guess when you are circle hook fishing, you will need to make sure that your line is got a bit of tension on it. As the fish goes to your bait, the bait will sort of go in its mouth. It's actually the process of, as the hook's coming out of the fish's mouth, you need to have that tension on there to get that hook in around the lip. So circle hooks are definitely the way to go. Lures are definitely the way to go as well. Very, very few will, you've got soft plastics or hard bodies or any other type of lures, just is very hard for a fish to swallow. So that's the type of ways that we want to be encouraging our snapper fishers to be using circle hooks and lures. The next wicked problem is barotrauma. Most bony fish will have a swim bladder. It's contained just above the gut cavity, in between that and the vertebrae, and that's to keep its sort of neutral buoyancy in the water. Unfortunately, due to physics, when you bring that bit of air further up, the gases expand. And so I've got a bit of a big gut cavity, but certainly if it was pumped full of air, there's not a lot of places my organs can go, and likewise with the fish as well. So it does do a substantial amount of damage. Hemorrhaging organs pushes out the stomach in some cases, bulges up, and so it's not really good for the fish at all. So when you have a look at all the research, it's around about 11 metres is where our snapper starts being affected by barotrauma. As the depth increases, unfortunately the level and severity of injury does increase. After release, it also makes them quite vulnerable to predation probably. And there's some new research being done out of New South Wales and Queensland as well, which we're having a look at. But it is an issue that we need to deal with. But the solution, we can't change physics, so we're going to have to fish smart. So what that means is try to target our shallow waters if we're engaging in catch and release. If you're going to be fishing some of these deep spots and like later in the season as well, go to those deeper spots to start with. If you get some good fish there, that's great. If you're getting towards enough of what you need or your bag limit, then how about heading in a bit of those shallow waters, maybe targeting a few different species as you go through. But certainly continuously fishing 20, 30, 40 metres of water, not all of your fish are going to survive due to barotrauma. If you're catching lots of little snapper, see what you can do, but try to move a few spots. But certainly if you're not getting the fish you need, move around if you can. But that's the advice that we've got from our veterinarians, that there's probably not a lot we can do with barotrauma apart from just being a bit smarter with how we fish, depending on if we're going to be catch and releasing, how many fish we want to catch for the day, and where of our spots we're sort of heading and the depth of those. But 11 metres deeper is where barotrauma will start to kick in. There's a heap of stuff we can do at the surface. Where possible, and look, I love taking my photos as well. Where possible, we have to make sure we don't get too much air exposure to the fish. If you think about, you've just hooked a fish, it's been fighting around for a few minutes. It's a bit like you trying to do 10 laps in the pool and then diving down and holding your breath for a couple of minutes. So the fish needs to get back into the water as quickly as possible. And certainly the gills are very quite delicate as well. I mean, it's out of the water, it's not much use to the fish in terms of its oxygen. So the solution is keep them wet, all right? Ideally, if you can try to avoid taking the fish out of the water at all, that's really cool. And if you're using circle hooks, hopefully it's a lot easier to de-hook your fish, leaning over the boat, and away you go. If you can't get your hook out, cut the line. Don't worry about the fish. I've caught plenty of fish. We've had to catch them for like broodstock, for aquaculture. Look, as long as it's not bleeding, that hook will eventually dislodge by itself plenty of times. But just cut the line, let the fish go, and just making sure that we're not using stainless steel hooks and things like that. You can use barbless hooks if you want as well, which might help. But circle hooks are great. You should have no problems getting those hooks out. The other solution is an absolutely quick release. So if you want to take some photos, make sure you're prepared. You've got your camera ready. You know where things are. Lift it out of the water, take some good shots, and get them in as quickly as possible. If you do, I've got to net the fish. Make sure they're a knotless net. So a fish's skin isn't just the scales. There's actually a mucus layer over the fish. There's got the scales and the skin. So any of that sort of skin gets rubbed off, which includes the mucus, may contribute to the fish not surviving as well. So knotless nets are great. And when you're picking up the fish, got to be horizontal. Make sure your fingers aren't around its gills or its eyes. Support the body there. Certainly don't hold up the fish vertically, and don't use fish grips if you're going to be releasing that fish. All right, so that's just some of the things that we need to think about when we're off fishing. Is I guess the circle hooks, using lures, minimising that time out of the water, preferably leaving in the water and having that quick release. And if we follow those sort of steps, then we're doing what we can do as responsible fishers to maximise the survival of our fish. But like me, I want to catch a few fish as well and keep them. So we can also do a bit more catch care at the fish that we do want to keep. I love ikijiming my fish, so spike for the brain, kills the fish like that once you know exactly what spot to put your spike in. But that will kill the fish instantly. Nothing worse than having fish still jumping around in an esky or on the deck. You're just not going to have a good quality fish out of that whatsoever. So ikijimi, if you haven't tried it before, all you need is a sharp needle or nail, and I've got some brochures down the back just to show which spot you need to hit for a range of different species. And storing your catch as well. So your frozen milk bottles aren't going to work. Really encouraging people to use ice slurry, which is so it's not just putting your fish on ice. You need water in there as well. So ratio to 1:1. That should keep the temperature 0 or below. And trust me, you can fantastic meal. So by the time you get back and fillet your fish, you've got the best quality fish as well. And hopefully you've also followed those kind of tips to maximise the survival of your fish as well. So we hopefully will be presenting this type of information over in Adelaide in a couple of weeks' time, and show them that Victorian anglers, this is the kind of stuff that we really believe in and can be spreading off maybe for a bit more of a national program. But I think if we can all play our role, whether it's around supporting the science, the compliance team, calling up 1-3-fish, playing our part with our fishing techniques, then we've got this great fishery which we're really proud of, and we can have continually operating for our future generations, including our kids. So thanks very much.